Hey, what's up, you guys? My name is Grace Lauren Taylor, and you are listening to episode 8 of the Trauma Dump Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Here at the Trauma Dump Podcast, we seek to answer the question, what is mental health? How do I take care of my own? And how do I support others? This week, we will be discussing the topic of toxic relationships or abusive relationships. If you or a loved one suffer from an abusive relationship, we have links in the descriptions to many different resources. Remember, the topics discussed here are for a mature audience, so viewer discretion is always advised. I'm so happy that you're here, and I'd love to get to know you better. So please join us on our Discord, where you can share anonymously your burdens and get help. Remember, if you'd like to share on the show, please message us in the Discord in the podcast participants channel, along with your unique experiences, and we will match you to the right episode. Hi, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Doing good.
Good. Have you seen any of the episodes?
I think I watched the first one.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. So with each episode, either the guest decides to be anonymous or not anonymous, or decides to have a pseudonym or not a pseudonym. A pseudonym is like a fake name. Usually they do it in books when you're writing a book and you don't want them to know who you actually are. So would you like a pseudonym, since you said you don't want to be anonymous?
oh no, I don't mind using my real name.
Okay. So introduce yourself.
I am Brendan. Um I've known Grace for probably like 3 years.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years from that
Yeah,
time.
somewhere around there. Um yeah.
And we met through the person we're going to be talking about today.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty crazy. According to WebMD, an abusive relationship is a term that describes any relationship where one person exerts power and control over the other in a negative way. Abuse can be physical, but it can also be emotional, verbal, financial, or any other type of behavior that keeps one person under the control of another. People of any ethnicity, gender, age, or sexual orientation can be a victim of abuse. It is never the fault of the abused person. It is always the responsibility of the abuser. Remember, I'm not a licensed health professional. I'm just a person who's experienced a lot of trauma, and I wanted to create this platform where we can discuss it openly without any judgment. So if you're going to take my advice as someone who has a degree in it, please don't. This is all for the purposes of being more trauma informed and removing that stigma from trauma. Any person can go through an abusive relationship. And men often go through abusive relationships, and there's so much stigma around it that, oh, you should just like chill, be quiet about it. You're a dude. Like, there's always that power imbalance that we think in our minds that, oh, men are always the abusers. That's not even close to being true. Anybody can be abused, and anybody can be an abuser. So keep that in mind when we're discussing this certain type of trauma. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome to the episode. Oh, gang. So, people who are victims of abuse often live with a number of problems as a result of the abuse, including feelings of isolation, embarrassment, depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts or ideations, addictions, injuries, and financial problems. Domestic abuse can come in many forms and is not gender specific. Today, my guest is a friend of mine, and he has experienced abuse in his previous relationships. If you or anyone you've loved suffer from domestic violence or have been or in a relationship that is abusive, help is available. The National Domestic Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a few questions to spur on today's trauma dump. If you ever feel like I'm overstepping or if you feel overwhelmed by a question, I can move on to the next one, or we can take a break if you need to. Cool. All right. So I would like you to tell our listeners a brief description, just a little synopsis of your abusive relationship?
I mean, I didn't really identify the abuse until I was out of the relationship,
Mm-hmm.
but knowing all of it now, looking back, um, probably about two 2 years in,
Mm-hmm.
I'd say is when there were at least some signs.
Yeah. How
Uh,
long was the relationship?
3 years.
Okay. So it was a pretty substantial relationship. It wasn't just like a couple month fling where you're just like hanging out. It
Yeah.
was an invested relationship.
Yeah, it was meant to go the distance.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it didn't. I actually know this person. I'm not going to say her name. We're going to call her P, but she knows who she is if she ever decides to listen to the podcast. I considered P my best friend for 4 years, and I felt extremely betrayed by them as well. Like, extremely, extremely betrayed because I thought we were close, but I felt gaslit a lot and lied to a lot. And I felt that she was continuously victimizing herself, which, from my perspective, makes me very angry. Um, when we were in, I say, this was about like 2 years ago, I think, when we first started talking about y'all's relationship being super, super serious. Because I'd met you before, but I
Yeah,
don't think.
very, very early into the relationship.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that you two would be super serious, right? I wasn't aware of that. Um, and I guess she and I had not a falling out, but kind of a distancing for a bit. And then we got back together as being like more hanging out almost every day. And she started telling me that she was going to marry you. Now, this was a red flag for me because she didn't talk about you all the time to me. And so I was like, if you're going to marry this person, why don't I know this person more? You know? Why are you distancing your friendship life, your life at Texas Tech, because we went to Texas Tech, your life at Texas Tech with your relationship, because you two were in a long distance relationship.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so I was um, shocked, to say the least, because it went from her talking about, oh, my boyfriend, to she would refer to you occasionally as her fiance. And so I was like, wait, 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 wait. You guys are engaged? She's like, no, 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 but we're gonna be married. And from my perspective, that was an instant kind of manipulation tactic to make me consider, okay, this relationship is like super, super, super serious. I need to get like involved somehow because I really wanted to be a part of her life. And a big part of her life was you. So kind of branching off of that, what was it like to being in a very serious long distance relationship?
Well, funny enough, it wasn't my first serious long distance relationship. Um, but it was kind of a learning from my mistakes from the last one I had had.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was also so different in so many ways.
Yeah.
It's tough to really compare them besides the long distance part.
Mm-hmm.
The a big struggle that does come with long distance is you have two sides. It's either missing this person such a crazy amount every day and just feeling so sad and sometimes crippled by the fact that you can't see them. And the opposite side, which is like indifference, where you just completely detach from it so you don't feel any sort of sadness from it. And it's very easy to waver between the two. It's very easy to stick in one. And so I was really trying to find a middle ground
Mm-hmm.
for this one. And I I met her with like 6 months after I got out of that prior relationship.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not doing the long distance again.
Mm.
And things continued. We kept talking, and then suddenly we were dating.
Yeah. That's interesting. Because when she would tell the story about like how you guys met, she knew that you had just gotten out of a relationship, and she told me that you were still in contact with the person that you had just gotten out of a relationship with.
Yeah.
And I advised her because, believe it or not, I am the therapist friend. Um, I am the person all of my friends would come to, and even friends of friends would come to me with their problems and ask for my perspective. And that's kind of part of the reason why I created the podcast, because not to toot my own horn, but I'm a pretty objective person. I'm able to listen and then give my opinion, and I really don't care whether you take it or not. But she was my best friend. And at the time, I was like, hey, um, he's still in contact with his ex. They're, I'm not negating you liking him. Great. But let's not rush into a relationship. And she was very much the type to rush in,
Yeah.
like really, really quickly, which all is fair in love and war. But to protect your feelings, don't ever rush into any type of relationship. Try to become friends first. That's my like advice for anyone out there.
That's what I've been living by now. And
Really?
ironically enough, I was the one who wanted to rush into things.
Really? Look, he's coming
I,
out with it.
well, because I went into it, we were both like, we're not gonna like, we're not gonna get attached.
Yeah.
Supposed to be a little quick summer fling week thing. And I mean, she said she got attached immediately, but I did get attached at some point in that time.
Yeah.
And we continued talking. And she told me she expected me to just be the kind of person to just talk to her and then like kind of just distance, like just naturally because of the distance.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I had stuck around. I was, like I said, I was used to that long distance communication. And like I said, and then
Eventually, you guys were in a very committed long distance relationship.
yeah.
Yeah. It's been said that those in an abusive relationship, it's often very difficult for the abused individual to realize that it's an abusive relationship until after they're out of it, or until they see something different, like drastically different, that they have to take a step back and go, whoa, something's not right here, something's not normal. um, I think that's true for your experience. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for real. I mean, I remember you were saying a bit ago, so I know I was still talking to my ex when I still met her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was actually like I almost got back with my ex around that time as well.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back on it after I got out of this past relationship with her, I was in, I still hadn't processed any of the stuff that happened with that last girlfriend until after P and I broke up.
Yeah.
And once I was able to find, I look back, I was like, I was in no place to get into either of those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of sucks that I still wasn't able to process that stuff like for a good 3 years because it really caused some, you know, bad feelings towards that person. And I don't like having bad feelings towards people.
Yeah.
Um, it was a lot of, anger that I never dealt with.
So, some tactics of abusive or toxic relationships include intimidation, economic abuse, emotional abuse, manipulation of others outside of the relationship, coercion, threats, isolation, gaslighting, grooming, and a lot more. When I think of this relationship, I also feel like an abused party looking back on it, because towards the end of the relationship, I think you guys broke up several times, but towards the official end of the relationship, she and I were long distance friends as well. I had left Texas Tech because my father passed away. And I was sleeping on the couch in my childhood home because my mom wouldn't give me a room. And I was spending most of my time with the kids that I was nannying, and then also with my current partner, who was allowing me to stay at his place off and on because my mother was doing some shit. And I didn't feel safe in my childhood home. So I told her about it. I was very open with her about my struggles. And I felt very dismissed constantly, that my problems weren't that big of a deal. Because she kept saying, well, I'm having a lot of problems with my relationship. Oh, I've always had a lot of problems with my dad, with my mom, with my family. And I'm like, okay. And so it put me in a place to not be able to share what I was going through very often. And it was always her sharing what she was going through, which is not a mutual relationship, right? And I took a step back for a bit from our friendship, and I, moved in with my partner. We started living together, and you guys got back together, and you both came down to where we were to hang out with us. And um, you know, Joey, who's my partner, instantly was like, "Oh, Brendan is so cool," and we all hung out together. We had some fun. You guys went back, and I think you went back to where you were currently living. And P was like, "Oh, we're having some more problems again. He's not really paying attention to me. He says that he wants to marry me. We're going to get engaged soon, but I feel like I'm not being paid attention to. He's not paying enough attention to me." And I was like, well, maybe he has some stuff going on. She's like, "Oh yeah, his parents are getting divorced." I was like, well, maybe that's a big reason why he might not be paying attention to you in the way that you would expect. And she went back to Lubbock.
Oh, and my dog had just died.
And his dog had just died.
That was probably the closest person to ever die to me.
Yeah, losing I mean, I have a service dog named Gigi. Losing an animal is so heart-wrenching. It's one of the most devastating things ever, because yeah, losing a person is really hard. I'm not negating that. But when you have a pet that's always with you, that's like the most continuous relationship that you can really have, and they're very temporary, sadly. But it's such a shock to the system because you're with them all the time. And that's a huge grief moment. It's devastating. And so P went back to Lubbock, and then P said that they're going to be spending the entire summer with Brendan, the entire summer. Now, months prior, I had asked P to come to my birthday. And I said, we're going to go to a beach somewhere. I don't know where yet, but it's going to be me and my brothers, Joey, and then my brother's best friend, who was like another brother, and then Joey's friend. And I was like, would you and Brendan like to come? Like, I would really appreciate having a girl. I was like, there's all these guys. I would really appreciate having a girl. And she would always be like, yeah, I'm going to come, I'm going to come, I'm going to come. So I had my hopes set up like really high. I was really excited. I bought us matching slippers and stuff like that. And
I forgot what happened with this.
I'm about to get to it. And she said, well, me and Brendan are going to come to Dallas real quick, and we're going to spend some time with you guys. And this was around Joey's birthday, which Joey's birthday's in May, my birthday's in June. And she said, we'll come back for your birthday. And so I was like, okay, bet I get to see you twice, because we were in a long distance friendship, right? Only contact I had was with her over Snapchat or the occasional FaceTime. And so I was super pumped. So you guys came in May for Joey's birthday, gave him presents, and then she also gave me my birthday presents. And I was a little like set back on this. I was like, hey, but you're coming for my birthday, right? You're coming for my birthday. And she was like, oh, yeah, 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 of course, I'll come for your birthday. So my birthday comes around. You guys are in Michigan, I think, at this time. And I was like, hey, I paid for the Airbnb. You guys don't have to pay me anything, but if you want to, you can. I would love to see you guys. I really miss you. You said you would come down. And Pete was like, well, I'm having problems with Brendan, so I may not be able to come. And I was like, what do you mean? What problems? And she made it sound like you were abusing her or neglecting her, which neglect is a form of abuse, right? If you neglect your animal, that's abusive, right? And so it made me extremely like perplexed because this is my best friend. I want to protect my best friend in any way, shape, or form. I'm like, well, we have a spare room, which is where I'm doing the podcast. We have a spare room. Come stay with Joey and I. And she's like, of course, I'm gonna come stay in my room. She kept calling this room my room. She's like, yeah, I'm gonna come stay in my room. We're gonna hang out and do whatever, but I need to solve whatever's happening with Brendan because he's like really being mean to me. I was like, mean how? Like I was very scared to say the least because the way she made it sound, she was being very withholding of a lot of information, and that's a sign that women, when they're being abused, can be extremely withholding. And I have had other family members that were like physically abused, and they were extremely, extremely withholding. So the little synapses in my brain are like, oh no, she's being abused. Oh no, she's being abused. And I was very scared, to say the least. And so, long story short, she keeps telling me, well, I'm going to break up with Brendan. And I was like, for why? Can you tell me about this? Because again, she was talking about how this is my relationship that I'm going to get married to him. And so that's such a stark contrast that it scared me. Do you remember any of this?
I do very, very vividly. So there, I wouldn't say necessarily neglect, but there was distance.
Mm-hmm.
So it was around that time when I sort of realized that there was something going on.
Yeah.
It was like two-way glass. Like
Mm-hmm.
you know something's on the other side, but you don't know, you can't see it. And so I
Yeah.
felt like something was wrong, and that kind of all kickstarted with my parents' divorce. And
Mm-hmm.
so their divorce and the reasons for their divorce kind of made me practically be like, am I gonna marry the right girl? Like
Yeah.
it's gonna last? Like I really got to make sure. And it kind of just opened my eyes a little bit and was like, and so that there was space and I was being a little distant, withholding probably near that end of the part until she left Michigan.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And it felt very sudden for me because even when we were still at Texas Tech, I left Tech, blah, blah. I left Texas Tech in October because my dad died in November. Even when we were still in Texas Tech in October, this was like a really big thing that you guys had planned of her
mm-hmm,
staying with you for the entire summer because Texas, Michigan, it's a pretty big distance. Yeah. And so she was going to drive the whole way there,
mm-hmm,
pass through Dallas to hang out with me for a little bit, drive all the way there, and spend the whole summer with you, which I gotta be completely honest, made me upset
yeah,
because she was also my friend.
mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, you have this whole summer. Why don't you come hang out with me? Why don't you spend some time with me for a little bit and then go up? And she was like, no, 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 no. I'm gonna spend the whole time with Brendan. I had to talk her into like you two spending time with us so
Oh
often.
really?
Yeah. I had to talk her into that. And it felt like wait, this is a very one-sided friendship. It's
And
yeah.
well, and I loved hanging out with you guys because I'm extremely extroverted. I
Mhm.
always loved meeting, like the first time I came up to Texas Tech, I met a handful of her friends, and I know I met you that way. And I love getting to know people.
Mhm. Yeah, and me too. I'm also a huge extrovert. And so it from my perspective, the relationship felt very forced. Um, and that made me extremely hesitant. It made me feel like when you're in a relationship that is like for the long haul, like you're going to
Mm-hmm.
marry this person, it should never feel very forced. And so her staying with you the entire summer when you guys don't have that much time together all the time
Mm-hmm.
would be such a stark, you know,
It
thing
was.
to happen. It
It,
was.
it was, especially because I had just gotten out of a, like, she had come up multiple times, and I always had my own like apartment or something.
Mm-hmm,
Um, but this time, since I kind of had to get out of a bad living situation, I was back with my parents for a bit.
mm-hmm,
And I mean, I was just in like an unfinished side of the basement.
mm-hmm,
And my a big issue that did honestly arise there was, since my dad's religious backgrounds, he doesn't want, you know, me sleeping with my girlfriend. At least he said he doesn't want to set the example for the kids. And I, it's his house. I got to respect that. But it was like, there's, my girlfriend who I am in a long distance relationship with. I don't get to see a lot of times. I'd like to, spend the night with her.
mm-hmm,
And that was tough on, that was I that and that was, I know, was really tough on her.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. And so she told me she had to sleep on the couch.
yeah. And I offered my bed because the couch was super uncomfortable. I love the couch, but she thought it was super uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But the basement was too, like, I don't know, it was unfinished. It wasn't very pleasant. I
Yeah.
don't really mind, but she did. So
And so there were different expectations for this trip,
hmm
staycation, if you
yeah.
will, of her thinking that, oh my goodness, we're going to be spending all this time together. He has a PC for me. We're going to be gaming all the time together. We're going to be that gaming couple. There was a lot of, yeah, she said that. There was a lot of really big expectations that as her friend, I felt very concerned by because when you set super big expectations for something that you don't know what's going to happen, like she had never stayed at your parents' house before, according to her. Had
I
she?
don't, I mean, technically, but like maybe just for like one night.
Yeah. So that's a pretty big difference. Staying with like for one night versus like 3 months. That's like a really big difference.
Yeah.
And so like as her friend, I was being very cautionary. It's
hmm
like let's set those expectations a bit lower. Let's try to figure this out. And I offered that you two stay here for 2 weeks.
Okay.
I offered that. And she was like, yeah, we'll stay for a couple nights. And that's when you guys stayed for Joey's
I
birthday.
think we only stayed for one night.
Yeah, but she told me that you were going to stay for 2 nights. And so when you guys left on the first night, after the first night, I was very confused.
Oh, that rush was on me.
Yeah,
That was on me. I had to get back to work. Like, I
felt.
had a lot of time off. It was because we wanted to stay there for longer. We
Mm-hmm,
wanted to, make a longer trip, but
mm-hmm.
we just had to straight shoot back to Michigan.
Okay, because I didn't know. Because
Yeah.
I had expectations of that
hmm
you guys were gonna stay for longer and that we were gonna be able to spend more time together and do more things. And then I also had the expectation that you guys would come back for my birthday. So that's why I got a
Wow.
really big Airbnb. It it had like 7 bedrooms. I'm not even
Wow.
kidding. I got a really big one. I splurged. It was my birthday. I was like super excited, and I like purchased that Airbnb 3 months in advance. So I had
Okay.
been asking her for 3 months, are you going to come? Are you going to come? I'm looking at Airbnbs. I'm trying to figure out price ranges of like, because my brothers are going to contribute towards it. My
Yeah.
brother's friends are going to contribute towards it. Joey's friend is. I need to know if you're comfortable with whatever price range, if you want to contribute. If you don't, like, I really want you there. So I might just pay for all of it. So that was like another big contention for me, because when you guys left, and then like literally the day before we were leaving, I was asking her, hey, are you guys going to come? And she was like, no, we're having problems. I need to solve our problems. So I was like, okay, understood.
Yeah.
I get it. Um, Hopefully I can see you sometime soon. And then she kept trying to get me to come to Michigan. She kept trying to ask me to drive to Michigan.
Really?
Yes, I could show you the like text.
I believe you.
Yeah.
I as much as I feel like I remember,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much that I also don't remember. I'm like, why don't I
Yeah.
remember this?
My friend A, I'll call her A. She likes to call it trauma delete when
Okay.
there's so much going on
Yeah.
that your brain is like, this is like too much. I'm just going to
Mhm.
delete this, delete this, delete this, and just remember the core events that
Yeah.
have happened.
Probably.
Yeah, trauma delete. I really think it's a real thing because I have it too, where I'll have to look back on pictures and then something will flood into my brain of, oh my gosh, I remember everything that happened on that day. And that was a really shitty day. That was like sometimes I have to take a lot of screenshots of different things so that I remember, and then I'll look back and it's like my own little personal little diary. Be like, oh, this happened on that day. This is why I'm mad at this person, because this person said this and this person said this, and this is why I'm mad.
Yeah.
When you think back on your relationship with P, do you think that she abused you? Let me ask you that question.
You know, it's tough because I don't like to necessarily see myself as someone who can be abused, if you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
But like I don't think there is any weakness in admitting that I was.
Mm-hmm.
Um because, I didn't realize it until like I'd say even when we broke up, I
Mm-hmm.
still like I said, I'm still like I know there's something there, but like I don't know what I'm looking at. I remember at some point after we broke up, we almost like we started talking again, and
Mm-hmm.
I kept telling myself like I would repeat to myself like you broke up for a reason. You
Yeah.
broke up for a reason. I used to, and it, you know, spiraled again. So
Yeah. So let's get into the juicy part of uh when I recognized that this is a very toxic relationship. Let me set the scene, okay? Set the scene. I am working full time as a nanny to 4 boys. I am living with my boyfriend. I had just started living with him because my mother had kicked me out of the house and told me that a bunch of stuff that I'm going to get into in a different episode, probably over narcissism. Leave that for a different episode. So I had just been kicked out. Number one, my dad had just died. Number two, I am now living with my boyfriend I had only, started dating for like 3 months. And I'm now living with him. And now we have just gotten an apartment together. Okay. So there's a lot of things going on. I'm also a nanny and I'm being paid under the table. I don't have a W-2. So they're using all of his income and his mother's income to get us this apartment. So I feel like a failure because my dad has just died. Shit is going really wrong for me. And I am kind of in the depths of despair. I think that was probably the peak of my manic depression. And
yeah.
it's also the peak of my seizures. Um,
Oh,
yeah. And so Gigi was with me 24/7, constantly signaling me that there was something wrong. There was something wrong. And I was feeling really, really bad. So I wanted support desperately.
I felt very cut off from all of my friends over at Texas Tech because, I moved out really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was dying. I had to get out of there as fast as I could because I wanted to spend his final moments with him. And I don't regret any of that. Also, Paige is in, wait, also P is in Michigan with her boyfriend, Brendan, who's on the show. And they're not doing great either. So she is wanting support from me, where I am having at least 3 seizures every day.
Wow.
And they were really bad.
Like it was not good.
I had hit the floor several times.
I was also working 2 jobs, and I had to quit the job at Alamo Draft House. I had to quit that week. I had just quit that job, so I was full-time nannying. And I felt like a failure. I felt like shit. And so P was wanting my support. And I'm like, I can't support you. I need you to support me right now. Things are going bad. And so P is like, well, I'm going to break up with Brendan, and I'm going to come stay with you for the rest of the summer. And I was like, okay, cool. Stay with me. We can hash things out. We can figure it out. She drives all the way from Michigan to Dallas. She gets here. The first day, she comes to my nanny job and just sleeps on the couch while I'm nannying, taking care of the kids. Right. We come back to my apartment. I'm like, what's going on? Like what's happening? What's going on? And she's like, I think he and I are going to break up. You think? You didn't break up with him before coming here? She's like, no. What? So you just left him and came here, and you guys are not broken. I was perplexed.
Yeah.
What was going on with you guys? Because I still don't know.
Yeah, well, I had kind of come to the conclusion as well that I was like, yeah, we're probably gonna break up, and I'd come to that conclusion kind of while she was still there for a bit, and because I remember having a chat with my dad about this, and I was just like, I have been grieving this breakup for a bit now.
Yeah.
And this wasn't to be any sort of power move or any sort of anything like that, but I've had to break up in, like, to say I'm breaking up with you in one relationship, and it tore me apart because like it feels like it's just ripping someone's heart out, and I don't like doing that. But I kind of understand that eventually, if this wasn't going to continue to perpetuate, I was going to have to rip the Band-Aid off. And so I think around the time she left, I was like, I'm going to give it a month. And if she doesn't do it, I will.
Okay. So you had a timeline in your mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who knows if I would have followed through with it, let's be honest.
I don't know. I don't know. So she gets to my place. She spends the first day sleeping. The second day, she says that she's going to break up with you over the phone. And I'm like, okay. And then I see her on our couch, and she's on Tinder. She's like swiping on Tinder. And I was like, are you still in a relationship with Brendan or not? Because I don't know what's going on right now. And if I'm aiding and abetting a cheater, I'm going to be really angry, right? Because that's very much against my ethics, number one. And number two, I feel kind of like she's an escaped prisoner. And she's staying. She's staying at my house, and I don't know what's happening. I feel very confused. And so she's like, "Well, I'm gonna break up with him over the phone." So she spends the rest of the day in this room and does not come out. Third day, she comes out. I've made a lot of breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, you want some breakfast? She's like, yeah. She's acting like she's totally fine.
Yeah.
Like, I have never seen her more chipper. Like, on top of the world, like, gang. She's like, let's go swimming. I'm like, okay, cool. Did I get my best friend back? I'm
Yeah.
really confused. We go swimming. We're in the pool, and Joey comes back from work, and he's like, oh, yeah, I want to swim too. And so he gets in the pool with us, and he picks me up, and he hugs me because he just got off of work. He hugs me.
Yeah.
And she's like, you guys are being disgusting in
Oh,
that tone. And that sets me back. I'm like, what do you mean we're being disgusting? She's like, you guys are being gross. And she swims away from us. And Joey's like, she just got over a breakup. Just
yeah.
crazy. And I'm like, okay. And Joey's like, I think she doesn't feel comfortable with me being here. So I'm going to go back inside. I'm going to take a shower. I'm like, okay. We eventually all come back to the apartment.
Mm-hmm.
We're all sitting on the couch. And Joey sits beside me and he has his arm around me. And she's like, you guys are being gross. I'm like, this is our apartment. This is our. What do you mean? What do you mean we're being gross?
Like,
She's like,
how is she saying it? Like,
you got,
genuinely, or was it like
yes.
trying to be
No.
playful, but like
No,
no?
she kept saying that we were being gross. And she's like, I can't stand it. I'm going to go back to my room. So she goes to the room. I don't see her for the rest of the night. The fourth day, I guess, she comes back and she's like, I think I'm going to go back to Lubbock. I'm like, are you sure? Because I thought you and I were going to go to the tower, which is in Dallas, like the big ball tower thing. And she's like, no, I think I'm going to go back to Lubbock. I think this is my last day. Like, okay. Because I didn't want to push.
Yeah.
I was so confused. She still hadn't told me if you guys had officially broken up.
I think we had. I don't know. I don't remember the exact day.
Well, I didn't know. So that day, she's still swiping on Tinder. And Joey mentions to her, why are you swiping on Tinder? Why are you on Tinder? And she's like, well, I met this guy on Tinder and I really like him. And he's in Lubbock, but he's already from Michigan. And he says he's going to Lubbock right now. So I'm just going to go to Lubbock to meet him. And we were like, you just broke up. The guy is from Michigan. Do you know this guy? She's like, yeah, I know him really well. Like, I've known him for such a long time, even before Brendan. And we're like, but you said you just met him on Tinder. So we were really confused. There were a lot of things that were not meeting up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So she goes to Lubbock the next day. And I don't hear from her for like a week and a half.
Yeah.
I don't hear from her. And so I'm getting concerned. I'm asking Joey, I'm like, should I go to Lubbock? Should I go check out if P is okay? Because I'm getting concerned. I'm also texting P every single day. Doesn't respond. And so I think I call you and I'm like, hey, is everything okay? And you're like,
at this point?
I think so, but you didn't answer. You weren't answering any of my Snapchats because I had Snapchatted you. You didn't answer any of it. And so Joey's like, he doesn't want to talk to you. Your best friend is the girlfriend that they just broke up. Like, he's not going to want to talk to you. And I'm like, I want to understand what's happening.
I don't remember because I'll let you finish yours part and I'll kind of tell you my timeline as well.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, she hadn't messaged me. I didn't know what was happening. So I then tried to go to the source to figure out what's happening. He doesn't answer me either. And so I spam the shit out of her every single day for 2 days straight. And then she's like, oh, I'm kind of busy right now. She's like very giggly. And I'm like, what are you doing? Where are you? What is happening? I'm so concerned. She's like, well, I'm with that guy that I met and he's over at my apartment. And I'm like, are you dating this guy? Is he your new boyfriend already? She's like, well, I don't want to talk about that right now. That's like way too soon. I'm like, yeah, that is way too soon. And I admit I was being a little hostile because I was frustrated. Like, I did not know what was happening. I was so upset. And I was like, okay, I don't know what to do. Please don't get into a relationship. She was like, no, I would never get into a relationship without your consent, without you knowing the guy first, because you're my best friend and I want him to know you and you to know him. And I was like, great. Okay. I gotta go now. Because I was angry. Because number one, I was invested in y'all's relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, it felt like she was cheating on all of us.
Yeah.
And number three, I felt like I was being lied to. So let's segue into your story.
So, she left. So she had been, I'd say, kind of the breaking point for me when she was here or when she was in Michigan was she looked at me at one point and just said, she's like, I'm miserable up here.
Hmm.
And I'm like, this is, I mean, our plan was for her to move up there
Yeah.
next year. Like, she was just shooting through school so she could move away from her family and come up to
Yeah.
Michigan.
I remember that also because I was on a fast track to complete school because I had an associate's degree already.
Yeah.
And she wanted to graduate with me. And I was like, well, you're a year younger than me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's really the right thing for you to do. She's like, I want to become a teacher. I want to become a teacher. I want to move to Michigan and become a teacher. It's like, do you know what is going to happen when you're a teacher in Michigan? Have you researched any of the schools? Do you know the districts? She didn't know any of it. And yeah, she had these ideals of becoming a teacher and moving to Michigan. And yeah, that's what I remember.
Yeah. And so once she said that is kind of when I like started like distancing myself a bit. And then I tried to get her to stay because still I tried working on things.
Hmm.
Um, but then one morning she just got up and left. Um, and not too long after that, we had that call, we broke up, and it happened in the last relationship I was in. Like, I was like, felt free of my chains, I
Yeah.
guess, or something. Um, and so I remember the following 2 weeks,
Hmm.
like just all I was doing was hang out with my friends because I had been in such a deep depression. I had been isolating like I'd become a recluse. Part of it was because of just the habits formed during COVID.
Hmm.
But I remember those 2 weeks I just spent so much time with my friends. Yeah, it was tough for me to hang out with my friends like when she was there too, because she didn't really mesh too
Hmm.
well with my friends. I'm not sure, but it was also like that's why like you're the only person I genuinely feel like I could talk to about her because you're like the only person that really knew her near the same way I did.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty surfacey with all my friends. And I mean, I guess a lot of me and my friends, like we had been friends for so long and we just kind of talked in our own language. And so I
Hmm.
understand I was definitely hard to accustom to that, accommodate for that.
Yeah.
But um it was tough to do that. So I was able to hang out with all my friends. And then eventually, after a bit, she reached out to me and was like, hey, can you send me these things I left there?
Mm.
And so I sent, it was a pair of sunglasses that
Yeah.
she had left there. And
Hmm.
so we just kind of start talking again. And I don't know, I was then like pouring out some regrets. And like it sounded like she was too.
Hmm.
And it honestly, like from that part, like kind of sounded like we were gonna start talking again and maybe get back together. But then um as we were chatting a little bit more, she kind of told me that she was with the other guy. And I was like, wow, that was quick.
Hmm.
Uh and then I was starting to like fall for her again and everything.
Hmm.
And eventually at some point she was just like, I'm with this guy, like he's my new plan now. And so I was like, all right. Like because she had been telling me and then she was like telling me like, hey, I don't want to talk as much, like, you know, stop trying to talk to me as much, and I was failing to respect that boundary. And so I was like, the best thing for me and for you, I texted her one day. I was like, I really don't want to do this. I just feel like I have to, but
Mhm.
I have to cut you off. I
Yeah.
can't have any contact with you.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't say like I have to, not move forward with you in my mind.
Mhm.
And I sent that out. And after that, I started to heal.
Yeah.
And things were going really, really, really well. Really well. And then one day out of the blue, I'm playing cards with my family,
Mhm.
and I get a Snapchat from her
Mhm.
because I had unadded her, but I don't think I blocked her because
Yeah.
I blocked her on text actually, maybe like a day or two prior to this actually happening.
Mhm.
And she texted me a screenshot of what she had sent me over iMessage and said, "Did you block me?" And I'm staring at this text, and this text that she had screenshot from herself was, "Hey, I'm still in love with you."
Yeah.
And this was like, from all the talking that we had done, like that was the last thing I expected to hear. And it was like I went like numb. Like
Mhm.
I love playing cards with my family. I get
Yeah.
so into it. I was just like staring into the abyss, just playing cards.
Mhm.
And eventually, the game ended. I go upstairs, I call my friend Evan, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what do I do? What do I do? And she's just like, don't do it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're right. But I still went for it. And so we started talking again,
Mhm.
you know, going back to our, I wouldn't necessarily say old habits, but just like chatting again, our normal routine that we had. But
Mhm.
she was with this other guy. And she
Yeah.
had basically told me, she's like, she just realized that, but she's like, I'm living with him. I'm miserable at my old apartment. And so she's like, once I leave for winter break, I'm gonna move everything out. We'll be good. And so we would chat all the time. I mean, we would talk and do things that she shouldn't be doing when she's in a relationship with another person.
Mhm.
And eventually that just progressed into, then she broke up with him, went back. Well, I do remember at one point
Mhm.
before I first told her, I was like, I can't talk to you anymore.
Yeah.
That was when the whole falling off with you two happened. Because I
Yeah.
remember the night I was hanging out with a really close friend of mine, and I remember getting that call from her being like, and so I didn't know that like all these seizures were happening. I knew that you had been dealing with stuff with like your father and all that stuff, and your mom especially. I didn't know a lot about that.
Yeah.
And so she just told me, she's just being like, I can't deal with her right now, is basically what she was saying. And that's what I heard. And so she was like
Mhm.
apparently like super hurt about that as well. But so back when she got back from Christmas break, she moved out of this guy's place, and we were gonna like kind of get back together again. And then suddenly out of the blue, she was just like, hey, I actually don't want to do this anymore.
Mhm.
Like, she's like, I was never comfortable with it the entire time. And I'm like, yeah, that was genuinely concerned. Because one thing she wasn't, because we would, there was, the way we, there was still a sexual side of the relationship that was still there. And she, for some reason, said, I never felt comfortable doing that this entire time since we started talking again. But I was like, you initiated it all the time.
Yeah.
So I was confused on why she said that. Still kind of am. But um, so she's like, I don't want to do this anymore. And basically I said, we either like give this the old college try, like one more try, because I felt like at the time I felt like there were things that could have been ironed out.
Yeah.
um and then the other alternative was we never talk again.
Mhm.
I'm like, you don't send me a I love you text and 3 months later, like,
Yeah.
do not do that.
Yeah.
And she chose the latter. And so that was January. What was that? I think that was like
Last year.
early January of this year.
Uh-huh.
That was the last time I talked to her.
Mhm.
And after all that, I had already started this healing process, and then I got brought back to zero.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was just so much more shit thrown on the plate that it was so much harder to move on that second time.
Yeah.
And eventually you reached out to me again, and reluctantly I talked to you about it, because every time I would bring her up, I would like get like shaky and like get a trauma response from it.
Yeah.
And so, but we talked about it. I learned a lot more what I did, and like it kind of opened my eyes, because there was a handful of lies that she was feeding me, that like when I did something like that, she like there was something where we were talking, we were
Mm-hmm.
broken up, we were
Mm-hmm.
talking again, like not even like she was still with this other guy too.
Yeah.
And I had hooked up with this girl, and I told her because I was being honest about it.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that really hurt her,
Yeah.
and that she lost trust in me because of that. And I was like, yeah, so. And then when you told me about everything, I'm like, oh, why? Like, why?
Yeah.
But yeah, and then just, I mean, and there were the few things that you told me that, because, I don't know what happened with her after she left Michigan, and you kind of filled me in on that. I'm like, it just didn't make much sense.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't make much sense.
Mm-hmm. No, it didn't make much sense. But from my perspective, it was her showing her real character.
Yeah.
Um, my idea is that she is extremely codependent, interdependent type of person. And if she doesn't have someone obsessed with her, then she's disinterested. And she was extremely full of herself in a lot of different ways, because she wanted someone to be all about her. She wanted constant attention, constant approval, constant admiration. If she wasn't receiving it, that person wasn't worth her time, and she didn't want to be around them. And so then she got into a very quick relationship where this person is enamored by her, and she's enamored with this person because they're enamored by her. And then that relationship gets, boring. And so she
Mm-hmm.
goes back to, oh, this other person, I know that I can sink my hooks in because I left something at their house. I can sink my hooks in. I can get them interdependent upon me again. You have this feedback loop again of just like, oh, I need you. Oh, I miss you. Oh, I love you. Oh, I'm, in this relationship with this other guy. But I miss you so much. I need you. It makes me remember how much I love you. And so when all of this was happening, we're going to go back to me. Um, when I heard that she had moved in with this guy, which, mind you, she had her own apartment. When I heard that she moved in with this guy, I was really angry for many reasons. I'll tell you the biggest two. Number one, I had lost my apartment because my dad died, and my mother was a guarantor on my apartment, and she told me she would never be a guarantor again. So I was going to be evicted because I didn't have all of the money to sustain being able to live
Mm-hmm.
there. I would have to reapply to live there. So I had to pay all of the money in my bank account, which was $1,800. So all in my savings, everything, to move out of Lubbock to come back to Dallas, to then just be sleeping on a couch until Joey kind of rescued me and
Yeah.
had me start to live with him. And, I was having really bad seizures, and he was helping me. He had saved my life several times from me dying from them. And I was dependent on him, but no, it wasn't a toxic way. It was, I need this person to help me get through this most difficult time in my life. If I did not have this person, I would have died. I'm legitimately saying I would have died. Like, I had a really bad seizure, hit the ground. Like, if I did not have Gigi, if I didn't have Joey, I wouldn't be here right now. And she compared her new relationship with mine.
Mm.
Here's the setup. I
Oh, I do
was,
remember this. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Here's the setup. I am nannying. She calls me, bawling over the phone, saying, why doesn't he love me? I'm like, what? Who doesn't love you? What's going on? I instantly become motherly, like, wait, what's going on? Because my best friend is crying on the phone. Why doesn't he love me? Like, who doesn't love you? Why doesn't Brendan love me? And I'm like, didn't you break up with him? Didn't you leave him? Didn't you, move out and come back to Lubbock just to start living with another dude? What do you mean? Why doesn't he love you? She's like, he doesn't love me. He's not like listening to me. He's not responding to any of my text messages. I think he blocked me. I'm like, yeah, for good reason. You guys broke up and you're with a new guy. You're living at a new guy's house. And she's like, well, you of all people should understand why I'm living with a guy. I've had such an abusive life, it's so much trauma. And, this guy, he's like really helping me out, like helping me. I'm like, then why do you care if Brandon loves you or not? You're in a new relationship now. And so I'm starting to get heated. I'm starting to get frustrated. I have a nanny, 4 boys, 4 little boys are like, what is happening? I'm like, get out of the room. And so they leave. I'm like, P, what are you talking about? Why are you comparing my relationship to yours? She's like, well, you started moving in with him and living with him within like a couple weeks. And, you're living with him now. Like, yeah. And she's like, well, it's just like me because, I was like forced out of what I wanted. And now I'm with someone that, is supposed to help me out with this. I'm like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I'm starting to get very angry. Like, P, my mother kicked me out. I had no place to go. I was legitimately homeless. I had no permanent residence. Okay. I'm legitimately homeless. Joey starts to help me live with him. And now we have an apartment together. Like our situations are not the same. My dad died. I'm having seizures. This is not the same. What are you talking about? And she's like, well, Brendan should just know. He said that he would always take care of me, and he's not taking care of me anymore. So this is all his fault. And I was like, I'm done. I'm absolutely done. This is ridiculous. How dare you compare your relationship to mine? How dare you? I'm getting frustrated now. I was so angry. Yeah. It like, I'm going through actual shit that is not self-inflicted. Everything that you're going through is very self-inflicted. You have your own apartment that you can go to right now. You have your own lease you can go to right now. You have your family that is still financially supporting you. I haven't had a family that financially supported me by the time I was like 17. They stopped. I've had to do this all on my own, and I'm trying to figure this out. And I'm damned because I have Joey now helping me out, and you're comparing your situation, and it made me just so angry. And I was like, I'm done with you. I can't deal with you. And I blocked her on literally everything. It's like, I'm done. And what did she tell you about it?
Oh, I mean, I don't have it anymore, but she sent me the voicemail you sent to her after you blocked her and everything. And she was distraught about it. She's like, why'd she do this? But I honestly don't remember too much. I remember the day and like all that stuff, surprisingly, but I don't remember exactly what it was about.
Yeah. It was basically me telling her, like, how dare you? Like,
And I didn't know any of the info. I had zero context.
Yeah.
And was getting one side.
Exactly. And that's a huge part of manipulation, is not having the full story and using these little snippets. She was really victimizing herself. Very much so. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm not going to say, like, everybody experiences abuse, and even like an abuser can, experience abuse and stuff like that. And so I know she definitely had some things that shaped her into the person she was, probably things that weren't too well, like didn't do her too well. But I mean, that's something you kind of gotta, at some point in your life, start taking responsibility for.
Yeah, definitely.
And I know, especially you talked about this point earlier. It's something I just want to press on even harder, because it's something that I've been trying to live by recently. Is like, I'm not looking for a relationship right now. I'm looking for like the idea of building a relationship off of friendship is all I want right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when I look back at my first relationship, I had probably the best friend I ever had. And we for like 2 3 years, and then we started dating. Things didn't end well, but when I look back at the relationship, it's like that was very very wholesome. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying that Paige and I's relationship was wholesome, but our relationship was built off of a sexual relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And not saying that those can't flourish and everything, but just because you have that connection doesn't mean you're going to have the best personal connection.
Yeah.
And at the end of the road, there were a lot of things coming out that just kind of realized, oh yeah, like that's not for me.
Yeah, definitely.
And
Okay.
so I've had a friend who, a very close friend of mine, who went through extreme situation, basically what I went through, but on a severe extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And we've kind of been able to help each other and lean on each other
Mm-hmm.
going through that. And I mean, she felt stuck in this relationship she was in for like 2 plus years, and she was in a 4 year relationship. Like she was living with him, had no way to get out. It was,
Mm-hmm.
and this was also the guy I was living with too. Like he
Yeah.
was my roommate, but um, yeah, just definitely realizing, recognizing what's going on because I was clueless.
Did you feel like you were being controlled in your relationship?
The only way I'd say I felt controlled was my words did get twisted a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I always put a heavy focus on this. I'm a very blunt and direct person. That's my personality. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I tell you exactly what I mean, there is no beating around the bush. I'm not passive aggressive,
Mm-hmm.
extremely direct.
Yeah.
And so I constantly try to reassure her that, because everything I say would get taken out of context,
Mm-hmm.
get there would be conclusion jumping.
Mm-hmm.
And so a result of that, I never really expressed how I was truly feeling because I was like walking on eggshells around her.
Yeah.
And when I would express my feelings, she would kind of not necessarily spin it, but like tell me it in a way that like, oh, I think we resolved this. Then literally the next day, this issue would re-arise. And when I would try and address it, she would just say, we already dealt with it. Like we already dealt with it. And so every time I bring it up, each time she would just make me feel bad about like bringing it up. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just didn't really, I just didn't really express much of how I was feeling
Yeah.
because of that.
Did you ever try to seek counseling while you were in this relationship, like therapy with each other? I think it's couples counseling.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I don't know if that was like, it was tough with long distance too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there probably could have been a way we'd done it. We could have, I mean, it would have been hard to do like a in person sitting down with someone else. There's probably online ways to do it,
Yeah.
especially after COVID and everything. But I feel like maybe I thought like going to couples counseling was just like giving up in a
Yeah.
sense. But one thing that was kind of able to help me, because you claimed that you felt she was codependent,
Mm-hmm.
and my eyes were actually open to that before we broke up, because that was the same reason my parents got divorced, because they
Mm.
realized how extremely they were codependent on each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so seeing that and then looking through that magnifying glass in my relationship, I'm like one thing that really stood out to me, which I don't know why this was the case, but she would only eat when I would eat. So like when she was in Michigan,
Yeah.
I I would, like, she would come home from work,
Mm-hmm.
and if I had already eaten before she had gotten home, she would starve herself. And I don't know why. Like, as I understand enjoying wanting to eat with your significant other, but not eating because your significant other like already ate
Mm-hmm.
was definitely confusing to me.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
That was a real thing. Um, I think I witnessed it. and I was very upset because I'm like, well, there's 3 meals in a day, and you can't not eat for the entire day just because you're not eating those 3 meals with your significant other. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And she was like, well, it feels more special. I feel like I can eat more when I'm with him. And I was like, that sounds like an eating disorder. And she's like, no, it isn't. It isn't an eating disorder because if I can't eat with him, then I don't deserve to eat. She told me that. And I was like,
What does that mean?
I don't know. And I was really upset by that because I'm like, well, I'll eat with you. I'll hang out with you. Why can't we just eat together? I think I ordered a pizza that day because we were
Yeah.
hanging out the entire day. I think I ordered a pizza that day and was like, you're going to fucking eat this pizza with me and we're going to chill out. Like, you can't FaceTime him. I remember I was like, no, you can't FaceTime him right now. We're hanging out. We are hanging out right now. You are
Yeah.
at my apartment. We are hanging out. Spend time with your friend. Because I remember when you guys, I think it was like a year in, maybe, but she and I were both working at Joe's Crab Shack.
The
And
crab shack. I forgot about
the
that.
Crab Shack. Yeah. I
Wow.
had already worked there, but I got her to start working with me because she needed money. And I was like, just come work at the shack with me. And we were working at the shack, and she was like, every single day she was so excited because you were coming through because you were
Oh,
moving your friend in for something,
I feel
and you were going
terrible
to
about this.
pass through Texas and come spend time. And I was like, oh, cool, cool. We get to see Brendan again. And then your friend or whatever said that no, that doesn't make any sense, like financially, like gas wise. We're not going to do that. And she was devastated.
Mm.
She cried and cried while we were at work, just constantly crying. And we were both hostesses. And so that entire day, I had to be the main host. I had to, you know, situate stuff. And she kept going to the back to just cry. And I understand being upset about stuff like that. Sometimes you just got to put it away to be able
Yeah.
to cry at home. Like, we were at work and it got so bad that she was sent home. They were like, you cannot be here to just cry. You're not working.
Yeah. And there's that balance I was telling you about between how much you feel and how much you don't,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to find a medium because you can't treat a long distance relationship like a normal relationship. It will fail. You'll miss this person way too much, or just fall apart, or just uh grow away from this person. And
Yeah.
so I definitely understand that feeling. And that was my fault. That
Mm-hmm.
one, what happened? I mean, that was the plan. My buddy was moving to Arizona. We are going to drive down there and move him out there. And it ended up not happening. And it was my fault because I knew for probably 3 weeks that wasn't going to happen. And I
Yeah.
was terrified to let her down
Yeah.
because I got her
And
hopes up. And the longer it went, the worse it got. And then she heard it from my friend, not
mm-hmm.
me. And he had no idea I hadn't told her. He's not at fault here, but yeah, I knew, and I felt terrible about that because I was like, I guess I got to learn from something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think it was definitely a learning experience, but her reaction really shocked me to my core of having such a, outpouring of just sadness over something like that. I couldn't understand it because the only grief that I've experienced is actual death.
Yeah.
I've never had relationship grief like that.
Oh.
And it made me extremely concerned for her well-being. And I don't think she came to work for like a few days after that. She just couldn't go to work. And it made me very sad for her. But when I hear you say that you were fearful of telling her, That's a sign of being in an abusive relationship. If you're
Yeah.
fearful of letting down the other person, or if you feel like your happiness, the person's sole happiness is reliant upon you, that's extremely abusive. That's
I
extremely toxic.
Yeah, there was a lot of like, I mean, I definitely still do like, definitely part of it was on me because that's like I told you, I was letting her down, breaking her heart. Like I didn't want to do that, and it just got worse the longer it took. But then also it was the, like you said, like the codependency aspect of it, like where how she's a lot of the times I felt like I wouldn't want to say I was responsible for her happiness, but she was like only happy when she was around me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and I didn't, I wasn't like, I was like, I went with it, but it wasn't something that I wanted to be permanent. Because
Yeah.
I always told her, I was like, I want you to have your own life outside of me, especially in Michigan. Like, she wanted to move up here. I was like, so when she got a job up here, I wanted her to make friends. And I wanted her to kind of like make friends up here, make a life for her because it hadn't really worked with my friends.
Yeah. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It did feel like when you guys were good, she was good with
Yeah.
me, with all of our other friends. And I did notice because we were in a friend group. We were in a
Mm-hmm.
pretty substantial friend group from her freshman year, my sophomore year. We all did a bunch of stuff together all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that she started to distance herself from our entire friend group whenever you guys were not good.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you guys were good, she would hang out with us. And then eventually the friend group fell apart and it was just her and me
Yeah.
because of just other drama within that friend group. Yeah, it was just a lot of immaturity on a lot of people's parts. But something that she told me that really hurt me was she was like, I just miss the old you. I miss the way the things were. I miss the way that things were. I wish things didn't change. Like
Yeah.
she would say that quite frequently. And, you know, I think about myself as a person. And yeah, I've had a lot of metamorphoses, but me as a person has been extremely consistent. I mean, you can watch, like, I've had a YouTube channel since I was 8 years old. You can watch
Yeah.
a video of 8-year-old Grace on YouTube. I'm the exact same person. It's scary. Like
I
Joey will look back on those videos of little Grace and he's like, that's terrifying. You were a fully formed individual, just like exuberant all over the place that you are now. And whenever she would say stuff like, I miss the old you, I wish things didn't change, it hurt. So I'm like,
yeah.
well, what have I changed? How am I different? Or you don't like who I am now? Because she would say that quite frequently. Did she ever say that to you?
Yeah. I mean, probably in the sense of like, because like our relationship started off, once it like, it hit its peak at some point in the middle of it and it slowly started to come down as failing relationships do. And so yeah, at some point, I mean, I feel the same as you. Like I have this video of me from literally 10 years ago, some project I did for school. It's like a minute video. I am this tiny little eighth grader
Mhm.
and I I'm talking and like doing this. I sent it to my friend and she died laughing. She's like, all your mannerisms are the same. The only difference is your voice is 3 octaves higher in this video. Like I was still me.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
a lot of things that had changed was just things weren't going well in the relationship.
Hmm. The
So,
experiences changed. You as an individual, I don't think changed. You
um,
might have developed more into your own, but I don't think it changed. A lot of the times when you're in an abusive relationship, they will use change in a negative connotation and they'll use it as a way to manipulate you or to make you second guess your own identity. I've been in a lot of like abusive relationships, but none of them as long as your relationship. They were
yeah.
more like as high as a year, as long as
Mm,
a year. And they would use the phrase of "you've changed" in such a negative way that it makes you second guess yourself. Well, wait, how have I changed? Am I not good enough? Like, what am I doing that's not enough for this relationship? How do I, you know, redirect? How do I do something to, you know, make you like me again? I feel like she used a lot of manipulation tactics on me specifically to make me second guess myself and second guess our friendship. And it made me like take a step back and feel frustrated because, you know, people that reject the present in favor of the past are not in a growth mindset. And what I mean by that is we as humans, for us to develop, for us to move forward, because the only constant is change, right? If there's people who are constantly in favor of the past and the past, oh, you did this, they're not recognizing your accomplishments of right now. And it can feel extremely isolating because when you're in any type of relationship, it should be mutual, number one, and it should be an acknowledgement of who you are right now and also an appreciation of who you were back then. But it should never be like, oh, we need to go back to whatever this was, because that's backwards thinking, right?
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. It's so hard for me to communicate how frustrating it is to be told that, you know, I miss the old you, because I'm like, I'm still the old me. My soul hasn't changed. Maybe the experiences that I've went through and the way that I interpret things have changed. The way that I, you know, interact in my space have changed, but my perception of myself hasn't changed. And so it makes you start to second guess things.
Yeah.
And holding on to the past and holding space for the past are very different concepts. One is super harmful and one is healing. If you're holding on to the past, you're preventing yourself from moving forward. Like I think there's a saying that, like, if you have one foot in the past and one foot in the future, you're pissing on the present. Because they like to think that depression is holding on to the past. It's not just that, but we can like conceptualize it as that. Like having depression is being stuck in the past, and having anxiety is being stuck in the future. And mindfulness is being present and whole with yourself. And that was a really big part of my healing, was trying to center myself and become more mindful and become more cognizant of what is happening around me. Because if I'm super anxious about what's happening, like going forward, if I'm super anxious about, oh, is this person going to keep liking me? Are they going to still be my friend? And then, oh, I'm depressed because they said these horrible things to me past, I'm not going to be able to, I can't be everywhere at once, you know?
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating with abusive relationships, is they put you in so much anxiety. There's like so much uncertainty.
And I'm not an anxious person. And I used to be. When I was little, I was on a bunch of different medications, but one of them was for anxiety. And then once I like hit puberty and everything, like that whole anxiety part kind of like left, to where I very understand the mindset of like, what's happened has happened. And a big one, because that was actually big, because P used to live, eat, and breathe stress. But it was, if I've done all I can to help a situation, then worrying about it isn't going to, it's a very logical mindset of it.
Mhm.
like worrying about it isn't going to help the situation. And I understand it's not just a flick or a switch that someone can flick,
Mhm.
but I was able to kind of attain that. And then being with P, it was a lot of anxiety built back into my life,
Yeah.
and it was just something I wasn't used to.
Yeah. Um, for those that don't know what being manipulated is, you manipulate people every day. Everyone manipulates people every day. Manipulation isn't necessarily a negative thing. It's very much a buzzword nowadays. Like, oh my gosh, I'm being manipulated. I'm being gaslit. It's very much a buzzword. When we say manipulative behavior, manipulating someone is doing things to get a certain outcome. So trying different tactics to get a outcome. Like, say, for instance, if I want an ice cream cone and I don't have any money and I'm a kid, I'm going to be like, Mommy, can I please have that ice cream cone? I will go outside and do these things. Or, oh, I'm just so cute and I don't have any money. You should take care of me and give me that ice cream cone. Those are different tactics that we use to get what we want. Manipulation is not necessarily a negative thing or a positive thing. It's just a thing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so when I talk about manipulation in abusive relationships, I'm talking about where this person is using you for their greater good and for your detriment. When I'm saying their greater good, something that they want to achieve, it may not be beneficial to them, but it's something that they want and it is for your detriment. So in an abusive relationship, people gaslight. Now, the term gaslighting comes from, there's a movie
Mm-hmm.
where this guy,
Yep.
is turning on lights and he's manipulating his wife. And I could go into like a whole episode over what actually is gaslighting. But
Oh yeah.
gaslighting is not just lying to a person, it's making a person feel crazy. It is warping their perception of reality for their detriment, number one, and it's also warping their sense of what's going on and making them second guess themselves. When we're gaslit in relationships, it can come in the form of, you saying, oh, that didn't happen. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and I think she did that quite a lot. She did that in our relationship when I would ask her, for example, hey, did you hear them say that? Um, I think they are asking you something. It's like, oh no, I didn't hear that. Oh, they didn't say that. When she had a reaction to something that that person had said, and
Mm-hmm.
now she's like purposely ignoring them and purposely like, no, 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 you didn't say anything. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. No, 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 no. She
Yeah.
would deflect constantly, and I think that was part of the reason why we fell out as friends, was because I was telling her things that's going on. She was like, oh, well, you may not know the full picture. Like, I would tell her things about how, my dad is dying
Mm-hmm.
and my mom is being really mean to me. She's like, well, she's losing her husband. She's going through a really hard time. Like, yeah, me too. I'm losing my dad. She can always get
Yeah.
another husband. And she's like, no, you need to give your mommy the benefit of the doubt. She's your mom. And it hardly ever felt like she took my side.
Yeah.
Does that resonate with you?
It was tough for her because I remember a lot of things that happened.
Mm-hmm.
I have a very, very good memory. And so it was very tough for her to ever, if she ever did try and do that, I don't really remember. Um, because it probably didn't happen. But no, when it comes to at least trying to say like, oh no, no, like I told you, she would constantly twist my words, and I'd be like, no, 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 this is how I said it, this is how I meant it, made it very clear.
Mm-hmm.
Like if there's a problem, like I'll tell you there's a problem. Like, but
Yeah. She would twist my words a lot to um where I would have to sometimes defend myself. Um and I noticed that she constantly felt like the guys in our friend group liked her in a romantic way.
yeah.
And um
That's the impression I always got because I didn't really meet most of them
yeah.
at some
And
point eventually.
yeah, and she liked the attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would tell her, I was like, hey, I think you need to set a boundary with, say, Paul. I think you need to set a boundary with Paul
Yeah.
because he is pursuing you. And she's like, no, he isn't. Like, yes, he is.
She knew.
I know she knew. She was gaslighting me. And I was like, you need to shut it down, bro. You're in a relationship. And that's kind of one of the red flags that I saw. And then when she finally, was dating you and Alex at the same time, and I was just like, I'm done. Because this
Yeah.
is just like a whole nother level of just like supreme manipulation. And I am not one to be manipulated by anyone because I was raised by a narcissistic mother. I know manipulation. My mother is a narcissist. You can scroll through her Facebook and you'll see it immediately.
Yeah, I feel like with some people extremely prominent, it wasn't I don't know if it's because it's like hidden behind like the cute little bubbly attitude that she has. Like
Mhm.
maybe, but like she never like in our entire relationship never really struck me as like any of the things that I found out to be true.
Yeah, she was very good at creating a facade, a caricature of who she was.
Yeah.
She very much wanted to be liked by everyone she met, like everyone she met. And if someone didn't like her, she would get very upset about it. And she would become very vocal about it if someone didn't like her. Um, we were at a party together over Halloween sometime. I don't know when. But she wanted to be a sexy cow and I was a sexy
You're the
beekeeper.
beekeeper, yeah.
Yes, I was a sexy beekeeper, and Gigi was dressed up in a bee costume because
Mm-hmm.
Gigi's my service dog, so she went with me everywhere. So it was the perfect costume,
Mm-hmm.
A tier, and she wanted to be a sexy cow. And so we went to this party. It was a rager. Gigi
Mm.
was like, everyone was like, "Oh my god, there's a dog." Anyway, but I remember when we left early because I was like, hey, I need to go take my medicine because something's going on with my body. Gigi's signaling me. She was upset that we were leaving early, number one. And she was also upset that no one asked for her number. And like there were several, I think they were all girls. There were several girls that asked me for my number. And I was like, oh yeah, of course. Like I was so excited to make friends.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't ask her for her number. Like she was with me the entire time. And she was very upset about that. And I was like, oh, I'll give you their number if you want to talk to them, if you want to be like, no, they didn't want my number. They don't deserve my number. I was like, I don't know how to solve this. Like
Yeah,
I
and I can understand that sort of like I can understand the being sad about it, but I guess I don't know to the level of extent she was upset about it.
she just talked about it for a couple days.
Yeah.
And I it something that I really recognized was I could never solve any of her problems. She would
Mm,
always present me with an issue that she had, and none of my solutions were ever good enough. And segueing back to when she called me, why doesn't he love me?
mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, number one, you're in a relationship with another person. Do you want to be in a relationship with Brendan or do you want to be in a relationship with, I think his name's Alex? Do you want to be in a
Mm-hmm.
relationship with Alex? Which person? She's like, I don't know. Like,
I don't know why I don't know if she felt like she could just choose. Like I don't know if she felt like she had that option. but I don't know.
She got herself into that situation. She wanted to be in a love triangle. She got to be in a love triangle.
Mm.
Um, yeah. That's kind of when I was done with being her friend, because I had also told her several times, like, if you love Brendan, if you say you're going to marry him, you guys both need to compromise. And she's like, well, I do everything for him. I'm moving to Michigan for him. And I was like, uh-uh, you should be moving for you.
She
And
told me she was moving there before we even started like dating at all. So
I genuinely couldn't tell you, but she also like completely changed her major so that she could stay at Texas Tech longer with her new boo.
yeah, that's something that kind of opened my eyes when she was like, she was just going through the motions
Mm-hmm.
just to like that is what screamed codependency for me. And when she
Mm-hmm.
told me this other guy's my new plan, I'm like, oh boy, that kind of made it easy for me to, because it was, I remember like near after that conversation where I was like, I gotta stop talking to you.
Yeah. 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 It made me extremely sad because the person who I thought was my best friend never really had my best interests
Yeah.
at heart. And it felt like I always had her best interests. And every time I would give her advice, because she would ask, like, I never gave it to her unwarranted. She was always asking. So I was
Yeah.
asking, what should I do? What am I supposed to do? And so I would give her advice. I would be extremely invested, and she never once took it. Ever, ever, ever. She never once took my advice. And when she was like, well, I'm just going to restart my whole major because, my grandma has money and she says she's going to pay for all of my school and she's going to do that screamed privilege, number one, because I paid for all of my school other than grants and like loans. I paid for my
Yeah.
school myself. And I was like, I, I, I was so upset because supposedly she had invested all this time into becoming a teacher, but her plan had failed with her significant other, so we have to restart everything, scrap everything, new plan, which I
Mm-hmm.
which I under I can comprehend. But she
Yeah.
was almost gonna graduate. Why not
Yeah.
complete the degree? I think she had a semester left. Why not complete the degree and then get a new one? You can always do that. That's always a really good option. But why start over from square zero to
Yeah.
do whatever so that you can be at school for a full time as your new boo? And then at the same time, tell me, oh, why doesn't Brendan love me? I felt so manipulated. I
I mean,
felt,
I guess I can understand in a sense where like, she put her entire plan into me,
mm-hmm,
and then that major key of the plan fell out, and I feel like over time, like her being a teacher and then being a teacher in Michigan was
mm-hmm.
also the plan. And so when I fell through, I think like maybe that also fell through too.
Yeah, but she kept harping on how this Alex guy was also from Michigan and how she wanted to live there with him. I never knew. I never had a concrete idea of what the hell was going on. So, to talk to our listeners real quick, from you to them, what would be your voice of reason in dealing with any type of toxic relationship?
I mean, there's so many resources that you can reach out to that can help you if you're in any sort of abusive relationship. Um, and honestly, just being aware of the signs. It's definitely going to be tough for me still moving forward because I'm very much I am easy to be manipulated. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I tell everybody everything. Like I don't have anything to hide, and so stuff can easily very be used against me. And I very much give people the benefit of the doubt constantly, constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And So with that, coming into that is that you just got to be aware of the signs.
Yeah.
And
Signs
I
of
also used to be I also used to be a people pleaser on top of that too.
Mhm.
And so I've definitely been able to mitigate that a lot more, and not because I would lay myself out for people to walk
Mhm.
all over me. And I would just, I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Yeah.
Like hope I was like, I would sacrifice all of my soul to help anybody else. And I've, come a long way from that. I've been able to put myself first, because I don't think I necessarily saw it as, because some people put it as putting yourself first as selfish,
Mhm.
but I just saw it as, why do I care so much what everybody else thinks?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so, because it would affect me, I would think, that was one of the very few things I would overthink about.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. What I would say is, again, manipulative behavior is harming someone, then attacking them for their reaction. And if you witness something like that, someone is egging you on constantly, and then you have a human reaction, and then they start to use that against you, see that as a huge waving red flag that that person doesn't have your best self interest. They don't have your best interest. I would say when you're in an abusive relationship of any kind, your self-worth is what matters the most. Because when you're in an abusive relationship, they will start to tarnish your self-worth. They will do everything in their power to make you value their opinion over your own, their perspective over your own, their reality over your reality. And something that can be super beneficial is to take a moment and collect who you are as a person. And if who you are as a person is surrounding or revolving around someone else, then you might be in an abusive relationship. Abuse takes on many forms. It doesn't have to be physical. It doesn't have to be, being punched in the face. It doesn't have to be being called names. Abuse is anything that involves neglect. It's anything that involves devaluing you as an individual. It's abuse is anything less than treating you like you matter. And it can be very difficult to get out of any toxic relationship because, when they value you, you value yourself, right? So what I would say is to take a step back, collect who you are as a person. And if who you are as a person is revolving around another person, you're probably in an abusive relationship, and reach out to other people and get their input. Because that's another big thing, is reaching
yeah,
out to other people.
yeah, I mean, it's probably just because of how I've seen most of the relationships you see growing up kind of form how you treat relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing that I typically saw was, if there were problems going on in the household, they stayed in the household.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was no ever, I never, people ask me, hey, how are you and P doing? Hey, yeah, we're doing great, blah, 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 and stuff like that. And I never, I don't know if I ever aired my dirty laundry to anybody.
Yeah.
And so, and it's something that I've definitely gotten more comfortable doing. And I have close friends to me that I trust, that I can share that with and know that they have my best interest in heart.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, getting a support system is crucial to any healing. It's crucial to your development as a human. And I just want to thank you so much, Brendan, for being on the podcast.
yeah,
Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing what you have gone through. I know it was pretty, difficult, but
it was difficult when I went through it, but I
yeah.
feel like I'm at the point where I can talk about it. Yeah, it's still, a little exhausting,
Mm-hmm.
but it's it's great to normalize things like this, like talking about them and sharing with them, and you know sharing your
Mm-hmm.
experiences, because all we learn from our experiences that we go through in our life. And you know, I learned the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can help someone else not learn the hard way, then I feel like I'm doing good.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
See you later.
Bye.